I pretended to sleep and heard my husband say something that destroyed me. My eyes were closed. I could feel the shape of the pillow under my cheek, the steady rise and fall of my chest, trying to sound like sleep. The room was dark, except for the faint glow from his phone on the nightstand. He moved across the bed, careful, as if he didn't want to wake me. He checked his phone, whispered into it in that low voice I had once loved in the middle of the night, and then, like a blade, one sentence landed in the dark. "I can't stand her. She's disgusting." Silence swallowed the rest. My heart exploded against my ribs. For a long time I couldn't breathe. I didn't move. I lay there, pretending to be asleep, while my entire life unspooled in that one sentence. If this has ever happened to you, type "me too" below. You are not alone. We were married 11 years. We had a life people envied from the outside. The house with the small garden, the photos from our wedding day, the way he used to swing me around in the kitchen while I tried to cook. Rodrigo and I met in our 20s. He was loud and confident. I was quieter, sketchbook in hand. We laughed at the same stupid jokes. We made plans like everyone does when they're young. Travel, kids, a house with a dog. Sophia came 2 years after the wedding. She arrived like a comet, brilliant and overwhelming and beautiful and everything that changes you in ways you don't expect. Pregnancy and the first months with a baby are all-consuming. I breastfed. I slept in snatches. I learned how to soothe a scream with one hand while answering an email with the other. My body shifted. Some of my clothes stopped fitting. My face had more sleepless lines. I went from being the woman who wore his shirts to a woman who lived in leggings and a hoodie, hair tied up, spit up on my shoulder, cheeks damp from nights I cried quietly into a nursing pillow. I will never say my weight was the cause of what happened. That would be both cruel and untrue, but it was the pressure point he used. At first it was small, an offhand joke at dinner about maternity fluff that he claimed was playful. A look here, a brief silence when I suggested we go out. Then the comments became sharper. He would call me clumsy in front of friends, criticize my clothes as tired, or say he missed the woman who had time for herself. He tested boundaries like someone tapping the edges of a fragile glass. What hurt most wasn't the weight itself. It was how he used it to make me shrink. The signs were subtle at first. Perfume that wasn't mine on his shirt, a new phone lock code, unexplained late nights. I told myself it was work. He was a manager. The job required meetings, dinners, travel. But the perfume lingered on his collar at home. He became unavailable in a different way. Not the tired unavailability of long work hours, but a secretive distance that left me clinging to explanations. When I asked, he smiled and said I was being paranoid. He suggested I was oversensitive. He never accused me of anything directly, so I learned to doubt myself. There were moments that should have been easy to read as alarm bells. Once, I brought home a pretty set of lingerie because I wanted to feel like myself again. He barely looked up. Another night, I found a receipt for a dinner he said was with partners, but the restaurant name was one we had never been to. He dismissed it. He learned how to turn every crack I peered into back on me. His specialty was gaslighting. I started to apologize for feeling hurt. The escalation lasted months. I noticed messages disappearing from his phone when he left it unlocked for a second. He would leave for work and come back with the smell of someone else's shampoo on him. He started staying up late on the couch and would claim he had been catching up on emails. When I pressed, he would talk about stress and deadlines, and my questions became the problem. The night I pretended to sleep was not the first night I suspected something, but it was the night the suspicion collapsed into proof. It was late. Sophia had finally fallen into one of those rare, heavy sleeps that feel like a gift. I kissed her soft head on the monitor and went back to bed. Rodrigo came in after me, careful as always, and I watched the light on his phone until it went dark. Something in me had decided I could either tremble in the dark with the not knowing, or I could just listen. I chose to listen. I closed my eyes. He whispered into the phone. I could hear the rustle of fabric, his breath close to the receiver. "Hi, love," he said in a tone that cracked something inside me because that was not my name anymore but a name meant for someone who was not me. Then a sentence I replay in my mind 100 times. "I can't stand her. She's disgusting." I felt it like a physical force, the air gone out of my lungs. Time slowed, the sheet heavy on my legs. The phone's dim light glowed against his palm. I lay still because I had to hold myself together long enough to make sense of it. The rest of the conversation hinted at plans, small, flippant things that added up to betrayal. He talked about how it would be easier, and the way he laughed softly, the easy cruelty of someone whose empathy had been traded for comfort. For months after that night, my memory lived in two tones, the sharp clip of that phrase and the blurry soft wash of everything else. The immediate aftermath was a kind of paralysis. I didn't scream. I didn't storm out. I lay there, feeling like I'd been reduced to something unrecognizable. I remember clutching the pillow until my fingers hurt because I was not ready to wake him and make everything real in a confrontation that would mean saying the words, "You betrayed me." After what felt like an eternity of staying absolutely still, rage edged under the numbness. It was not the melodramatic heat you see in movies. It was cold and precise. The children in books call that clarity. I called it survival. I knew two things. I could let that one sentence become my undoing, or I could use it to start protecting my daughter and myself. I started to collect proof, not in the way Hollywood depicts, no hacking, no dramatic break-ins, just the small legal things anyone in a marriage can do when alarm bells ring. I saved messages he accidentally left open on the laptop. I kept emails that mentioned names he tried to pass off as vendors. I took screenshots of conversations he'd left on the screen. I moved our joint savings into accounts where my name alone appeared, not because I wanted to be sneaky, but because I needed to make sure Sophia and I could sustain ourselves if he walked away. I told my mother what had happened. She came over and sat with me while I made the calls I couldn't make when I was shaking. When I called the lawyer, I felt ashamed and ridiculous and absolutely necessary all at once. The woman I sat with in her small office did not patronize me. She listened, asked questions, explained options without promises, and told me what I needed to protect my child. That alone gave me a sliver of power. The law, even when imperfect, provides tools you can use. I remember the day I confronted him. I cornered him in the kitchen and the audio file, my voice, my proof, played on the phone between us. I had recorded his own words earlier, when he'd said something else that had confirmed the pattern. I did not invent anything. I offered him the phone and watched him listen to himself. He stared at me like someone seeing their reflection after a bracing cold splash. He stammered, then tried to apologize, to explain, to tell me it had been a mistake, that he had been confused. He asked me to forgive him. He asked me to forget. Forgiveness and forgetting are not the same thing. I told him I needed more than words. He begged. There was an animal panic in his voice when he realized the certainty of what I had. He was not used to consequences that stuck. He told me he was sorry and pleaded for another chance. I stood there with a child on the stairs who had been sleeping through everything, and I realized my first obligation was to her, not to the man who could be so cruel in the dark. We filed. It was painful and bureaucratic and humbling. Contested divorce means rooms filled with legal language and 1,000 small humiliations. In hearings, my lawyer presented the evidence, messages, photos, the audio clip where his voice had found its cruelty. I will not pretend the process was clean. There were days when the courthouse felt like an altar for the worst parts of us. There were nights I lay awake imagining what people thought when they heard our name. The result, when it came, was not dramatic in the way movies are. The judge made decisions about custody and finances based on what was best for Sophia and the stability she needed. Custody was largely awarded to me with structured visitation that allowed Rodrigo to be part of her life in a way that was appropriate and monitored. There were protections put in place to ensure our home and savings would not evaporate overnight. Those outcomes were by no means guaranteed. Every case is different, and I don't say this to make promises to anyone. I say it because, for me, those measures kept my daughter safe and let us rebuild. There was a moment after the papers were signed that I thought would make me feel triumphant. Instead, it felt oddly empty. The victory was not in humiliating him. The victory was in standing upright when everything in me had been told to shrink. Healing was not linear. The first months after the divorce were full of small battles. Rage walked alongside grief. I cried over silly things and clung to routines like a child. I started therapy, not because I was broken beyond repair, but because I needed someone to hold my story and help me order it. I learned to name the lies he had told me about myself. I learned how to set boundaries. I learned that anger could be useful if it directed me toward rebuilding. Part of that rebuilding was physical, but not in the way the world might expect. When I started going back to the gym, it wasn't to get him back. I didn't want revenge. I wanted my body to feel like mine again, strong, capable, present. Nutrition became a way to care for myself rather than punish. Movement felt like claiming space. Some weeks I would look in the mirror and hardly recognize the face, and other weeks the reflection was mine again, steady and soft where there had been jaggedness. Weight loss for me was symbolic, because in losing the physical weight I had gained after childbirth, I was also shedding the shame he had projected onto me. But I never made it the goal. The true goal was to be well enough, confident enough, peaceful enough to be the mother Sophia needed and the woman I wanted to be. People ask what it felt like to start dating again. It felt foreign at first. I had to relearn how to trust my gut about someone. I also had to accept the reality that not every man would be Rodrigo. When I met Daniel, it wasn't fireworks or cinematic fate. It was conversations that left me smiling the next day, respect that didn't make me prove my worth, and small kindnesses that multiplied. He listened when I talked about Sophia without flinching. He admired parts of me that Rodrigo had belittled. That doesn't erase the past. It simply became proof that the future could be gentler. There were days I still replay the whisper in my head. It shows up at unexpected moments, at the supermarket, when someone flirts with me and I find myself flinching. Late at night, when Sophia tucks into me and I think about the shape of the family we are building. But those moments are thinner now. The voice that told me I was disgusting does not have custody of my sense of self. If you've ever been called names, minimized, made to feel small inside your own home, hear me clearly. The problem was never you. Cruel words reveal the one who speaks them, not the one who receives. Many abusers use insult and contempt to keep power. Those words are a poor mirror. They reflect their brokenness, not your worth. I don't share this story for pity or revenge. I share it because there are women, mothers, partners, friends, who are lying awake in night with their eyes closed, counting the glow of a phone and trying to decide whether to pretend to sleep or to step into the light. You do not have to be alone in that decision. You do not have to let one cruel sentence define the rest of your life. If you're in a similar place, please consider talking to someone you trust. Reach out to a friend, a family member, a professional. Check the links in the description for support groups and legal resources that can help you understand your options. And remember, planning and protecting are acts of love for your child, for your future self. They are not shameful. I still carry pieces of that night with me, but they no longer have the power to destroy. That whisper destroyed a version of me that had been shrinking to fit someone's cruel idea of me. In the wreckage, something else was freed. I learned to stand firmly on my own legs. I became my daughter's safe harbor, steady, predictable, fiercely protective. I found a partner who treats me with respect and admiration. I reclaimed my body, my finances, my voice. If you're listening now and you feel small because someone made you feel small, start with one small thing. Tell one honest person. Make one sensible phone call. Sit with a therapist for one appointment. None of this is a magic fix. This is a series of tiny truths you tell yourself until a new life builds around them. I pretended to sleep that night because I was afraid of what waking up might mean. The thing I heard did destroy something. A complacency, a lie, an acceptance of small cruelties. But out of that destruction came the strategy and strength to rebuild. If my story helps even one person find the courage to take the first step toward protecting themselves and their children, then this painful story has done some good. Subscribe for more real stories like mine, and share this with someone who needs to hear that they are not alone. For immediate help and a list of organizations that can support you with legal guidance and emotional care, please check the links in the description. You are not what they called you. You are more than that sentence. You are worthy, and you can reclaim your life.